All right, let's dive into some Swedish urban planning today.
Sounds good.
You sent over a really interesting set of documents. 01 one uppövda detaljplaner and 02 fastställda detaljplaner, to name a few. And looks like you're really interested in these heated debates around development in Sweden.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for sure.
From what I've seen in these documents, some residents are really going to great lengths to protect their neighborhoods.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
I'm really curious to get an expert take on all this.
Well, I'm happy to help.
Luckily, I have someone right here with me who can help us navigate these complex Swedish legal codes and unpack what's really going on.
Yeah, it's definitely more dramatic than you might expect.
Right.
You know, we often think of Scandinavia as this peaceful utopia.
Right.
But when it comes to urban development, passions run high.
Yeah, so let's paint a picture for our listener.
Okay.
It seems like a lot of Swedish towns are experiencing this tension between honoring their heritage and the pressures of modern growth. What surprised me was this case where residents rallied to save a historic park from encroaching development.
Wow.
It really highlights that clash between preserving the past and accommodating the future.
That's a perfect example
Yeah.
of what we'll be unpacking today.
Okay.
Swedish law places a huge emphasis on preserving the character of a place,
Okay.
which can lead to some really fascinating legal battles.
I can imagine.
What's particularly interesting is how this concept of character goes beyond just aesthetics.
Right. It's not just about pretty buildings.
Exactly.
I was struck by this case involving the proposed apartments near the historic writing stable. Residents were worried about horse allergens affecting their health.
Oh, wow.
That seems like a pretty unique challenge.
Yeah.
Does Swedish law actually account for things like that?
It does, and this work is really interesting.
Okay.
Swedish law aims to balance competing interests.
Okay.
So in the stable case, you have the potential economic benefits of the new development and the desire to maintain equestrian traditions. But those have to be weighed against the well-being of the residents.
Right.
It's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
And the legal documents you provided dive into how these considerations are addressed within Swedish law.
Speaking of competing interests, another document you sent mentions a development that could impact the views of Stockholm's famous church spires.
Right.
Those views are iconic.
Yeah.
I can see why people would fight to protect them.
Absolutely. And in Sweden, visual impact is actually a recognized legal concept in urban planning.
Really?
It's not just about preserving pretty views.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how development can change the entire feel of a place.
Right.
And how those changes might affect the people who live there.
I see.
Especially in a city like Stockholm, with its rich history and stunning skyline,
Yeah.
these considerations are taken very seriously.
You mentioned how Swedish law gives citizens a voice in the planning process. Did you find any examples of how residents have used that legal framework to challenge developments? I'm curious to see how these things actually play out in real life.
There's one case where residents felt that a proposed development would completely destroy a beloved green space in their neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
They banded together and actually hired their own legal representation to fight it.
Wow, they weren't messing around.
No, they weren't.
I bet that gets expensive.
It can, yeah.
What legal arguments were they using? Did they have a strong case?
They argued that the development would cause significant inconvenience and demonstrated a disregard for individual interests.
Okay.
Those are directly pulled from the legal arguments outlined in Swedish planning law.
Oh, wow.
It shows that residents are really well informed
Yeah.
and know how to use the legal system to protect what matters to them.
That's amazing.
It is.
It sounds like Swedish citizens are pretty empowered when it comes to urban planning.
Yeah, I think so.
That makes you wonder if we could learn something from their approach.
Definitely. But it's important to note that it's not always a clear-cut victory for residents.
Right.
The developers and municipalities push back, often with compelling arguments of their own.
I see.
The legal documents you provided actually reveal a lot about their side of the story, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember seeing some discussion of densification being tied to environmental goals. It seemed like they were arguing that denser housing could actually be a good thing for sustainability.
Right.
Was that a common theme in the documents?
It was. Densification is a hot topic in many Swedish cities.
Okay.
The argument is that by building up instead of out, you encourage walking, cycling, and public transportation,
Right.
which reduces sprawl and, in turn, carbon emissions.
Okay.
So it's not just about squeezing in more people.
Yeah.
It's about creating more livable, sustainable cities.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that these issues aren't always black and white.
For sure.
There are valid points on all sides. It sounds like Swedish urban planning is a constant balancing act.
Exactly.
So how do they actually make those tough decisions? Do the documents provide any insights into the decision-making process? What happens when these different values clash?
That's what we'll be exploring in more detail as we continue our deep dive.
Okay.
Swedish municipalities have a range of tools at their disposal,
All right.
from specific legal protections for historic structures to rigorous environmental impact assessments.
I see.
But ultimately, it comes down to weighing all of these factors and making choices that reflect the complex realities of each situation.
This is already so fascinating. We're getting a glimpse into a system that's clearly very well thought out, but also incredibly complex.
Yeah, it is.
There's a lot to unpack here.
There is. And what's fascinating is that these seemingly local disputes, as illustrated in the documents you provided, raise broader questions about sustainability, historical awareness, and the future of urban living.
Wow.
There are microcosms of global challenges.
I'm eager to hear more about that global perspective.
Right.
Let's dive into the specifics of some of these cases and see what lessons we can learn.
Sounds good. These documents are a treasure trove of information. And one thing that stood out to me was the sheer depth of legal knowledge these residents possess.
Right.
Their arguments aren't just emotional pleas.
Yeah.
They're meticulously researched
Okay.
and often point to very specific clauses within Swedish law.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I guess when you're passionate about something, you're willing to put in the time to understand the complexities.
Absolutely.
Do any specific examples come to mind?
There's one case where residents successfully argued against a development by highlighting what they saw as a lack of clarity in planning documents.
Oh, interesting.
They basically argued that the municipality hadn't adequately explained the project's impact, hindering their ability to give informed consent.
So it's not enough for developers to just say, hey, we're building this.
Exactly.
They need to be transparent and demonstrate a clear understanding of the potential consequences.
Transparency and accountability are crucial in Swedish urban planning.
Okay.
If residents can't grasp the rationale behind a project or how it might affect their lives, they have grounds to challenge it.
That's fascinating.
It is.
It shifts the power dynamic somewhat, requiring developers and municipalities to be much more thorough in their justifications.
Right. They can't just assume their plans will sail through.
Right.
They have to make a convincing case that aligns with both existing regulations and the needs of the community.
It's like a constant dialogue between the different stakeholders.
Absolutely.
Which is probably a good thing in the long run.
I think so.
And speaking of dialogue,
These documents also reveal the other side of the coin.
Right.
The arguments made by developers and municipalities in defense of their projects.
Yeah, you're right.
They're not just these faceless entities pushing for concrete jungles.
No.
I'm remembering now those arguments around densification and its connection to environmental goals.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. So densification is often presented as a way to achieve broader sustainability objectives.
Okay.
By concentrating housing in urban centers and encouraging walkable neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They aim to reduce reliance on cars.
Right.
Thus lowering carbon emissions.
That makes sense. It's interesting how they're using urban planning as a tool to address climate change.
Yeah.
It reframes the whole debate.
It does. It challenges the simplistic notion of residents versus developers.
Right.
And highlights the multiple layers of interest involved. Mm-hmm. You have economic considerations, environmental concerns, social equity, historical preservation.
Right.
It's all interconnected.
It reminds me of that famous quote.
Yeah.
Cities are the solution, not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's about finding a balance. Right.
Exactly. Swedish planning law attempts to create a framework for navigating these complexities.
Okay.
But it's still an ongoing process of negotiation and compromise.
And probably a fair bit of healthy debate as well.
Of course.
But ultimately, these documents are a testament to how a society grapples with these tough questions, how citizens engage in the process, and how those collective choices shape the urban landscape.
That's what makes this so interesting.
Right.
It's not just about buildings and regulations.
Right.
It's about people, their values, and their vision for the future of their communities.
Precisely. These Swedish legal battles offer a glimpse into a system that's designed to give voice to those values.
For sure.
It makes me wonder how their approach compares to urban planning in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Are these challenges unique to Sweden?
Okay.
Or are they more universal?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And it's something we can explore further as we delve into the global implications of these Swedish examples. What's striking is that many of the challenges they face are mirrored in cities worldwide.
Okay.
The pressure to develop, the need for affordable housing, the desire to preserve green spaces and historical character.
Right. Yeah.
These are global concerns.
So in a way, Sweden is a microcosm of what many cities are grappling with.
Yeah, I think so.
Perhaps they're even paving the way for future solutions.
They might be. And as the world continues to urbanize at an unprecedented rate, these lessons from Sweden become even more relevant.
It seems like we could all benefit from studying their approach, both the successes and the challenges.
Absolutely. And that's precisely what we'll do.
All right.
As we continue our deep dive,
Okay.
we'll examine how these Swedish legal battles connect to the broader conversation about the future of urban living.
It's amazing how these Swedish legal cases, which might seem hyper-local at first glance, actually touch on such universal themes.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see how their experiences offer valuable insights for cities around the world.
Yeah, for sure.
So, looking at the bigger picture, what can we learn from the Swedish approach to urban planning?
Well,
what stands out to you as particularly relevant for other cities facing similar challenges?
I think one key takeaway is that citizen engagement is not just a nice to have.
Right.
It's essential.
Okay.
The Swedish system empowers residents to actively participate in shaping their communities. And that level of involvement leads to more thoughtful and nuanced planning decisions.
Right. And they're not just voicing opinions.
Exactly.
They're coming to the table with a deep understanding of the legal framework.
Right.
I was really impressed by how residents leverage those legal tools to protect their neighborhoods.
That's crucial.
Yeah.
It's one thing to have regulations in place. It's another to have citizens who know how to use them effectively.
Right.
And the Swedish experience shows that when citizens are informed and engaged, they can truly influence the direction of urban development.
Yeah. It seems like they've struck a good balance between individual rights and the collective good.
Yeah.
But I imagine it's not always smooth sailing.
No, not always.
Were there any examples in the documents where things got particularly contentious, where those different interests really clashed?
Of course, there's one case where a proposed development would have encroached upon a historically significant park.
Oh, wow.
It sparked a huge debate.
I can imagine.
With residents arguing for preservation.
Yeah.
And developers emphasizing the need for new housing.
I can see how that would be a tough call.
Yeah.
A city's history and green spaces are so important to its identity, but the demand for housing is a very real concern, too.
It is.
What happened in that case?
Ultimately, after a lot of back and forth,
the
development was rejected.
Really?
It was a major victory for the residents.
Wow.
And demonstrated how seriously Swedes take historical and environmental preservation, even when it means sacrificing potential economic gains.
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
It suggests that sustainability and heritage are not just buzzwords in Sweden.
Right.
They're core values that are deeply embedded in their approach to urban planning.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a valuable lesson for all of us.
Yeah.
No matter where we live as we navigate the complexities of urban growth, we need to be mindful of the long-term consequences of our decisions.
Right.
And ensure that we're not just building for the present, but for future generations.
That makes a lot of sense. So after diving deep into these Swedish legal battles, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this exploration? What's the big aha moment you'd want them to have?
I think the key takeaway is that urban planning is not just about buildings and infrastructure.
Okay.
It's about people, their values, and their aspirations for the places they call home.
Yeah.
And it's a process that requires ongoing dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to learn from different perspectives.
Beautifully put. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping our cities. Whether it's attending community meetings, advocating for green spaces, or simply being more aware of the forces that shape our urban environments, we can all make a difference.
Absolutely. These Swedish cases demonstrate that even seemingly small actions,
right,
like a group of residents challenging a development proposal,
yeah,
can have a ripple effect and contribute to creating more sustainable, vibrant, and livable cities for everyone.
And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of Swedish urban planning.
Great.
We hope you found it insightful,
yes,
thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
For sure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the topics that matter to you.